Oh, Nancy, it's so great to have you back. I'm so excited to
Philly,
have you
yeah, great to be here.
present for us again on the Positive Psychology Hour, a partnership with the Whole Being Institute. Um, we are going to be talking about, hang on, loneliness, right?
Togetherness and loneliness. Yep.
Yes, that juxtaposition of those two things. Let me just pull up your, um, it's not coming up. I'm just having a day today.
I'm happy to read it if you want me to.
Yeah.
Would you please? That would be great.
Yes, so you just have to give me one moment to, I also want to say hi to, we have so many people joining us as well as many past presenters and future presenters. So that is a joy to see. Here we go. All right. I'm just pulling up Nancy's blurb. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay. So today's title is called Loneliness, Holding the Tension of Opposites During the Pandemic with Dr. Nancy Kirsne. We know from the research and practice of positive psychology that relationships are among the strongest predictors of happiness. We also know that one of the biggest challenges during the pandemic has been staying connected to others. The human creativity in maintaining connections online has been impressive and inspiring. And despite this, its opposite, loneliness, is at an all-time high. In this webinar, we will take a deep dive into both loneliness and togetherness as dimensions of whole being that work in a curious synchrony. Join us as we explore the key ideas outlined by former US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, MD, in his book Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. And Dr. Murthy, of course, is our current Surgeon General. Learn about 3 distinct types of loneliness and the corresponding 3 circles of connection. Dr. Nancy Kirsne has been in private practice, teaching and consulting for 45 years. In 2015, she became a certified positive psychologist through the Whole Being Institute. Nancy loves translating positive psychology principles and research into applied practice utilizing experiential learning. Dr. Kirsne, co-author with Phoebe Atkinson of wrote a chapter in Action Explorations using psychodramatic methods in non-therapeutic settings and in positive psychology, edited by Adam Blattner. She is a past president of the American Society of Sociometry and Group Psychotherapy and has been the editor of the ASGPP Psychodramatic Network News for the last 3 years. Also, Nancy, as Caroline said, spoke for us last year. Welcome, Dr. Kirsne.
Thank you very much. Carolyn, I want to check in about time because we're starting late. So I need to think about, I need to end exactly at 1. Is that accurate? You're on, your mic is on.
You can end when you need to. We can take the time. People might have to drop off, but
I just wanted, I can adapt. I know how to do that. Well, I think enough about me. I did want to tell you a little bit about how this came on my radar. I think we've all been doing a lot of sharing of books and throwing things around. And as Phoebe said, I'm part of the Whole Being positive psychology world. And I'm currently taking another course with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. So I was listening to one of his lectures during the pandemic, and that's been an experience being with lecturers and us and famous people and Frederickson, because we've all been working through this together and creating and people doing research. And I heard Dr. Tal use this phrase, and I'm a word person, and he said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And I was fascinated with that saying, and it just took me into where did that come from? And it's a very old saying. It's been used politically. It even goes back to Napoleonic days, but it really got me thinking about what are the golden nuggets? What are we sifting through in this crisis? and it actually was happening pretty much weekly. I mentioned before, I've had the privilege, really, it's been an honor. I've done over 100 groups in my community and with my temple. It's been the most intimacy, even though many of us knew each other for 20 and 30 years, to be in groups with a lot of the same people. And this has happened, I know, at JCC too. We went through things together. So people were all along the way talking about what, the positive things, the intimacy. Gee, why was I so busy all the time? So there was a lot of this sifting and perspective taking all along the way. And then I was thinking, as we're moving yet through another transition of, getting the shot, how do we re-enter? Do we re-enter? Everybody's in a different kind of stage of this. As often happens, Phoebe or Caroline or one of my buddies that are on here will say, hey, look at this book. So Phoebe said, oh, you got to look at this book by Dr. Murphy, this amazing book. And I started looking at it and I was totally riveted. So I'll tell you why I was riveted, not just because he grew up here and not just because he's Surgeon General, but let me put up my slides and go to share screen. Oops, I'm so excited. They're still there. Okay, did they go up? Why did they not go up? Where are you, slides? Stay. Why are they not staying up? Let me see if I can. Okay, there we go. Screen sharing, share. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Okay.
We don't see them yet. We don't see them yet. What I would do is, there you go. Now.
They're there now?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So this will help you understand a little bit kind of what so fascinated me about this. There's just a picture of my buddy, Jasper. I have a wonderful service dog who has helped me get through the pandemic. He's sitting beside me, but there he is in the picture. So here is Dr. Vivek Murthy, and here is the book. For those of you who we've heard a lot. We know about the Surgeon General from cigarette packages. We know about the Surgeon General has had a lot more to say, but I didn't exactly know what is the role of the Surgeon General. They're America's doctor. Their role is to safeguard the health of our nation and also to deal with critical public health issues, of which we've been quite in the middle of one and probably heard a lot more from different people about medical issues. As Phoebe said, he was the Surgeon General under Obama. And then again, he's been appointed under Biden. And what was fascinating about him, and I have a crush on him, I really have I want to meet this guy, is when he was with Obama, he decided when he came into his position that he was going to go around the country and do a listening tour. Now, how many people, and that right away got my interest of somebody in that position with so highly, Yale, Harvard, took a listening tour. So he went around the country, and this book that I showed you is actually the result of him going around the country, talking to people. And what he came away with, and this is pre-pandemic, because this book was published in March when we were just falling into the pandemic. This book came out in March with he came away with the most astounding realization. He thought he was going to be hearing a lot about, typical public, our main issues, cardiovascular disease, obesity, addiction, all those kinds of issues. However, he came away from this tour with the profound awareness that America had an epidemic of loneliness and that it was a huge public health concern. And that was what riveted me. Now, if he was coming away with loneliness as a huge issue for America pre-pandemic, and now we were in the pandemic and we were at the beginning of it, that was very, very profound to me. He even felt as though this was a main underlying issue for diabetes, addiction, the opioid problem. He really kind of took it to that very basic, very human word, that very experience. And I thought that was so important. And that's kind of what was very riveting to me. So if I just get across to you to being able to look at loneliness in a new way and to make it a subject we can talk about, I think it's a little bit like, so about shame, shame, people are ashamed to talk about it. So we're going to be taking it out of the dark and making it something that's important to talk about, to normalize it, to name it. And as we can share our stories of loneliness, I think it will encourage and help other people share their stories. Let's see. So this also is from the book. And it's the recognition that you know how you always feel like you're alone. You do feel like you're alone, whether it's depression or whether it's an eating disorder or whether it's loneliness. It's the nature we kind of feel like we're the only one that's going through this. And, that if we talk about it, we're going to be judged. And the idea that we're suffering in isolation is not the idea, but the reality is that's what's so important about making this more normal and more public, because people, when they feel lonely, they tend to isolate. And so you're all alone. And as we know, the thing that heals, the thing that keeps us afloat is human connection. So this is a very amazing quote. And then I tell people this was my first therapist, Mr. Rogers. I grew up in Pittsburgh, where the first Mr. Rogers shows were on KDKA. But Phoebe's been talking this phrase for the last few months about, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And my brain went, I think Mr. Rogers said that. So I had to go look it up and share it with you. And here's, not to laugh about it, Mr. Rogers, made a huge impact. He was the first minister that was actually assigned children on TV, Episcopal minister. That was his ministry. And what he did for the world then and for children, he said, we need to talk about these things with children. And he was very brave. When Kennedy died, he went on the air and he did shows for the children. And so he's kind of my hero. And I think it's really true. And I think it's what friendship and good therapy is about, is if we can talk about it, it's not in our head anymore. It doesn't look so scary. And then we're with somebody. And if we can talk about things and give them names and labels, they do become more manageable. Let's see, where am I at now? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm going to stop share for a moment. If I can figure out how to do that. Oh, maybe I'll just leave that up. Is that distracting for you if I leave that up?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
And I can also stop it for you if you want.
Okay. So that's kind of what hit me. And that was kind of my my motivation to really take a really, really deep dive into this. So if that loneliness was at such a level then, I think that it's fair to kind of make the jump and say, even though we haven't said it, I think the main mental health issue of the pandemic has been loneliness. Just to reframe it. We've called it different things. We said, we have to go into quarantine. I remember when social distancing first came out, I remember we had to do, what was social distancing? We didn't know what that was, but quarantining, social distancing, all of this has embedded in it loneliness. I joke about it. I say I've been living in my kitchen and functioning from my kitchen, but underneath the joke is, it's pretty lonely in the kitchen, So it's about, I think, elevating an awareness about this whole loneliness thing, normalizing it, speaking about it. And as I speak about the loneliness, I want to keep connecting it with the togetherness, because they are hardwired and evolutionary. I'm not going to get into a lot of the neuroscience and evolutionary part. Sherry can come back on and do that. She's good at that, Dr. Sherry. But they are dynamically connected. So in a way, we can't separate them, because the loneliness is kind of that red signal that goes on and reminds us, hey, we're out there alone and we need to connect again. So reasons for loneliness. There are a lot of reasons for loneliness, and certainly what's on this slide in no way includes it all. We have the pandemic loneliness, which I'm talking about, and then we have some of the lonelinesses that are really embedded in it. Loss of relationship, friends, and family. Well, while they may not be lost to us, they're still here. We can't touch them. We can't be with them. We can't hang out with them. This is also true of our social networks, whether it's our girlfriends, our tennis club, meetings we had. Also, loss of status and identity, job and career. Some people have lost their jobs and career. I also think, just to name some of the more non-pandemic related issues, when you get divorced or when you become a widow, even some of what we might call empty nesting, there's a loss of that identity, as a wife or as a partner, or you feel like your mother role as it was has changed. Another cause of tremendous loneliness is discrimination and bias and stigma. And one of the touching things about Dr. Murthy, another way that I personally connected, is his family moved to Miami, not far from me actually, into a very nice white upper middle class neighborhood, and they were the only Indian family in the whole community. And he knows about loneliness and bullying, and he talks about it in his book from a very deep and young level. And one of the points he makes that I think is so important is he came from a very loving context. And when you read about his family, and his father was a physician, and he kind of very much like a family physician, and became friends with clients and neighbors, and a very loving community he grew up in. And he talks about, despite all of that loving and nurturing environment, the painfulness of being discriminated as a man that had dark skin and looked differently, and the painfulness of the bullying, it was not offset by all the nurturing. It was something he really had to deal with. And I think that some of the depth that you will see if you read this book and the stories and the sharing, he's an amazing man. And if you get to know him a little bit, I think you'll feel really good that he's up there in office taking care of us. I do. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit before about that we don't always see the faces of loneliness. It can be kind of insidious, not just because people are ashamed to talk about it, but they may not have it labeled for themselves. So it could appear as a lot of different things. It could appear as sadness or depression. It can look like anger or someone that's alienated and distant. So the affect that comes with loneliness doesn't always look what you would think you might label loneliness. And I want to make a distinction. This is an important one between what's loneliness versus aloneness, versus loneliness, isolation, and solitude. I'm going to make a little distinction, and I think this will really help you kind of cue into this for yourself and others. So loneliness is a very, very subjective feeling, and it has nothing to do with how many people are in your life. It's really that feeling, that internal subjective feeling that you're cut off from the people with whom you belong. You're kind of cut off from your tribe and you're missing them. I think my best example is I've got a lot of people in my life that I love, and my specific loneliness is for my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandson. That's one of my specific, who I haven't seen in 15 months. And I heard somebody else mention they hadn't seen their mom in a while. So loneliness is subjective, and it's that internal feeling of, I feel cut off from my peeps, the people that I really belong with. We're going to go into a little more about that. So I want to distinguish loneliness from isolation. Isolation is actually the physical state of you're alone. You're out of touch with people. And certainly it's a huge risk factor for loneliness. And isolation is what we were mandated to do, when the virus came. Now touch and being with humans was dangerous. it was serious. So going into quarantine, social distancing, that was a mandated form of isolation. And then the last thing I want to kind of distinguish from, because this is kind of an interesting part of that whole spectrum of loneliness, isolation, is solitude. And I think this has been some of the gift for some people in this. So solitude is a state of peaceful aloneness. And most of the time it's voluntarily chosen. It's an opportunity to go inside, to go deeper, for self-reflection. Usually when we're doing something where we're in a stage of personal growth or being creative, that often involves, that kind of chosen solitude. So you can see that these are three distinctly different aspects. Let me see, where should we go to next?
So Nancy, I just wanted to comment that in relationship to solitude that Megan and several others were sharing, there appears to be a few of us who are not lonely due to the pandemic that are actually thriving. And that is a relief for Megan, she said, because I have felt guilty that I have not felt, that I felt a lot of joy in my aloneness and solitude this year. It's been a time to be with myself. I can be on Zoom when needed. So to my non-lonely pals here, thank you for speaking. Another good book is This Is Where You Belong. It discusses ways to help yourself feel more a part of your community or where you live or have moved to. And then there was a quote from Tall that says, not everything happens for the best, but we can make the best of whatever happens.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for bringing that out, because many people had that gift of solitude in place before the pandemic. Perhaps they were meditators, or they, but for other people, this has been something they've kind of been able to learn and given permission to do because of the pandemic. And hopefully we can take away the guilt. And I think I have my magic wand, let me take away the guilt, because actually being able to choose solitude is probably one of the best ways to stay balanced and being a state of well-being and whole being. It's a very important aspect of, if you want to call it self-care or befriending yourself or staying grounded. So thank you for.
Yeah, and there are others that have said they have loved the lockdown and are even hesitant about returning to the pre-pandemic life because it's been a relief to not have to deal with people that they find annoying or even unfriendly. Right? So that's it's really, I love that your talk today is about that juxtaposition of what we're, being together and being alone, right?
Absolutely. And the other day I looked up, I always like the meaning of words, and it was interesting to learn that crisis actually means comes from a Greek derivative, and it means discernment and to choose. And I think that's what we're doing now, is we're sifting through this crisis to make some discernments. Some of these things we've defaulted into are tremendous gifts. This is just I didn't want to say that nobody addresses loneliness. The wonderful Mary Oliver has this wonderful poem on loneliness. And she was an amazing poet. And one of the things you notice from her poetry is her comfort. Her poetry is often about nature, and her passion was taking very long walks in the wild and in the woods. And you can even hear her words are always very simple and very profound, that she's known the loneliness. And then you can kind of hear how she uses nature is her comfort, is her nurturer. So I just wanted to share that beautiful poem with you about loneliness. So let's see where we are here. Okay, so I'm going to warm us up to the action piece right now. And just like, thank you for the quote from Tal that I forgot about people that know how to make the best of things. And I'm going to just let Tal set the table for me. And I think it's about choosing connection. Dr. Tal also likes to say, at every moment we have a choice. So Dr. Murphy's really kind of saying that we need to choose the connecting life, and every decision that we make, from do I go on this Zoom call, or am I going to take the afternoon off and have some healthy solitude, or am I going to walk with a neighbor live? You know, every one of these choices is going to bring something to our life. And it's all about staying connected in a healthy way. So don't get scared by this diagram. I will not test you on it. This is kind of some of the meat of what Dr. Murphy is talking about is our very circles of connection. So while I'm talking with you, if you don't have a paper and pencil, and it'd be good if you had, you know, a regular size sheet of paper, you know, or two, so you can scribble, and don't worry about any of the words and just make 3 circles. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this. This is really about something that's called, we call it your social network. This is about your social network. So the inner circle, the intimate circle, are your close friends and confidants. During the pandemic, we've been calling them, sometimes we call them our peeps or our pod. So these are the people, you know, that we hang with the most. And I'll show you on mine in a second. So the inner circle is your intimates. The middle circle are your occasional companions. You know, you don't see them all the time. Maybe it's some school friends, casual friends. You share some support and some connection, but these aren't your inner circle. Those are the people you share your secrets with and your close stuff. So there's the middle intimate. There's the inner intimate, there's the middle occasional, and the outside ring is kind of the community, the collectives, you know, the groups that we're part of, you know, belonging to the tennis team, a temple, a church, you know, the golf team, your women's group, the various collectives that are part of our life. And Dr. Murphy likes to say in normal times, you know, this is his version of whole being, 60% of our time, you know, ought to be spent in connection with our intimates. And another 40% kind of divided between the outer 2 circles. And one of the interesting examples he gave, because he does talk a lot about the impact of technology, both in connecting us and disconnecting us. And he uses, you know, he talks with personal examples, and he was saying that when social media first came out, he got very intrigued and he started spending a lot of time with it, responding to some of these casual friends, people from medical school, people he didn't know. And then he said, you know, in a few months, he turned around and he was spending, you know, a good % of his intimate time. It felt intimate. It's nice to talk to that friend from medical school or that person from high school, but he was using a lot of his time, which he could have spent for the intimate, you know, in that kind of social media, Facebook connecting. So it's an interesting thing how there's an upside and the downside, you know, to our technology and how we're using it. Let's see. So here's kind of how plain your little circles can look. And I'm going to keep this one up so you can see it. But I also I'm going to walk you through this so you don't have to think about it and you don't have to do it alone. And I'm going to show you what my little scribbly one looks like. So yours doesn't have to look, there's no perfect way to do this. In fact, it's something I just created. So I hope I get some feedback from you. And this is my first round using it with a group. I've done it, Phoebe, you've done it. So all feedback welcome. So here's what mine looks like. So you put yourself in the center of your intimate group because you are the center of your universe. So put yourself in the center. You can see NK there, my initials. So in my intimate group, these are the people that I have seen during the pandemic. You see Jasper, my dog, right there, okay? And then you see some names of some of my women friends who are in the neighborhood. I walk with them. You know, we've seen each other right since the beginning. And then you see my daughter, son, and twins because they live in town. So they've been my intimate group. And then you also see in several places, again, you're going to put in this, not just the people in your life, but you'll also notice that I have activities and places I used to go are also here. And you can put that in for yourself. You notice I have nails, groceries, spontaneous trips, beauty parlor, office. So it's not just the people that you connected, but also the places and activities that you did, because they were part of your social network as well. So you see my middle one, and then the other, and do this kind of spontaneously, just let it come out. It's interesting that that purple circle is Zoom friends. And this is the groups I've been doing at my temple and in the community. They would not have been in the intimate circle in normal life, because I might have done a group once a month. I might have done a group once every few months, but now we're meeting twice a week. So the intimacy that has developed in those groups that I do in the community is huge. There's things we've shared and talked about we never would. So that's why, and this is totally subjective, there's no right or wrong way. So that's why they're in the middle group. You can see and that's why they're in the inner group. You can see in the middle group that I have some other friends listed. I have my Zoom clients because they feel more like they're in that group. I have some of my Zoom communities, including JCC, Whole Billing, Whole Being Institute, an improv community I'm in. So that's some of the communities there. And then you'll notice on my outside, you see a lot of minuses. So this is a lot of the community things in the world that I no longer do. That's why all the negatives are there. So there's no right way to do this. So with all that said, I'm going to go back to this one. So everybody have a piece of paper to scroll on? So put yourself in the very center of the middle circle. And you can close your eyes if you want, or you can use another piece of paper beside you to put a list. But think of, who are the people who've been in your pod? Who have you been closest with? Your close friends and your confidants during this time. So this is a here and now social net, looking at and it could be a confidant in your inner circle that you're totally obviously on the phone with or Zooming with. So who's in your inner circle, your close friends and confidants? And I usually just put initials, you know who they are. If anybody has any questions as we're doing this, please feel free to ask. And don't forget pets count. Pets count. If nature's part of your life, you walk, you dance, and that's part of it. Activities that that are important to you, that have sustained you.
You put the lunch and learns in the middle circle, but I'm feeling like I want to put them in my inner circle because that has been sustaining me.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
And I like how you paid attention to that. This is totally subjective. I only showed you mine because I didn't want you to think it had to be fancy schmancy, and I wanted you to see that it's really kind of like your own little Rorschach of your relationships. So yes, pay attention to where it feels like it belongs.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the things that were in my outer circle were in my inner circle now. So you bring up a very good point. I think that was Abby. This is called sociometry, and it's your social connections. And our social connections in the world are always fluid. They're always changing. And they should be, because that's how life is. People move into our life, people move out of our life. So there's a fluidness about this. And we're just kind of taking a snapshot of what our social connections, our life connections, our place connections, what it looks like right now as we're in this pandemic at whatever phase we're at. So why don't you move to your middle circle? which are your occasional companions that are in your life right now. So this is the occasional companions now are starting to be for me, since most people in my age group have gotten vaccinations. So I'm starting to occasionally see face to face some people outside, of course. So who are some of the occasional companions? Occasional companions also were, depending on how you each handled, the pandemic, occasional companions sometimes might be people that came to your house to do a service. If you've had the same yard guy or pool guy or something for a lot of years, not that they would be a companion, but they might have been some of those occasional people that we were happy to see in the middle of the pandemic, to see a face. So whatever's in your middle circle. And then if you're ahead of me, or wherever you are, this outer circle, are your colleagues and your acquaintances and community people, that like the people that I might only see like when I go to my professional office building, that brings a group of people that I see that I normally don't see. Or if you go to your church, some people are starting to go back to their church or their synagogue, they're seeing people that are from that community ring.
My outer ring is all negative. It's who I'm not seeing. The gym, the pool, my yoga classes,
Right.
my teaching in person, it's all not there.
Exactly. And that's some, what I wanted to say is associated with each of these rings is, and I wanted you to do this so you could see it. So you're really talking about, the loneliness for those communities and those people. So there's three specific, I'm sure there's more, but in this model that Dr. Murphy offers us, there's three specific kinds of loneliness associated with each circle. And you were just talking about, you didn't label it loneliness, but you said it's not there now. The loneliness, if I may put the word in, that you have for those groups in your life that you don't see. Even the loneliness for people have been telling me how wonderful it was to get their hair cut, even the guys, or to get to the nail salon, or to just do something normal like that. Any other questions, and kind of where are you at with filling this out? I'm trying to pay attention to time here so we have enough time to. Does everybody basically have it filled out that we could go into some, Carolyn's going to put us into groups. Certainly if you don't want to go into a group, you don't have to. But do you think we have time to do that, Carolyn?
Sure. Caroline, yes, we do. That's all right. Lisa was saying that she thought the circles maybe should be reversed and that the outer circle should be positive as we hold the negative small.
Oh, wow. I have to think about that, Lisa. That's a lot interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And Karen was saying, I feel so blessed to have connections. I heard a story about a person who asked a nurse giving a vaccine shot to remove her protective glove because the recipient had not experienced human touch for over a year. The nurse obliged and removed her glove. Really makes me feel grateful for each and every one of my connections.
Wonderful comment.
Beautiful story. Yeah. Did you want to do the breakout rooms now?
Yeah. And let me just, in your breakout room, I would just like you to talk about, just kind of look at your connection diagram and kind of what's changed for you. What do you see there that's very different than life pre-COVID? Just kind of make some observations and some sharings with whoever's on the line, and then we'll come back together of what do you notice? What's different about your connections? What's missing? And if you see some places where you'd say, well, yeah, there's some loneliness there. See if you can recognize where the loneliness might be hiding.
Awesome. Let me stop the screen share so you can see everybody. And then we'll go ahead and create those rooms.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to open up all the rooms. And you've been invited to join a breakout room. I'm going to stop the recording for a moment.
Some people think that's easy. It's not. And it's the kind of friend that can just sit with you and receive and be with you and has no other need other than to be there to receive you and support you. Beautiful quote. A friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness. That is a friend who cares. I love that. Brings tears to me every time, right to the heart. This is a wonderful guy, Dr. Lederach. He's an international peace builder and conflict resolution. And I wanted to bring this to you because the way he trains his teams is kind of summarized there about how does he teach people to communicate, to resolve, to have peace and conflict, which I thought are great things. It's the reality that we're listening to understand and to receive. No other agenda. We're listening to understand and receive. Not about convincing, selling, or changing somebody's mind. And that it's always best if we can, it's not how profound or wise we are, it's really, can we speak from the heart and can we be real and authentic? And then the last reminder, which I think is always a good one, some of us communicate for a living and it's very easy for us to find words, but everybody has their own warm-up and their own rhythm and their own style. And, you just have to remember that and be patient and persist. But people are important, other people matter. So just stay at it. If it doesn't, open up and go right away, just stay at it. Persist in the communication. Another wonderful thing, this also came out of Dr. Murthy's book, and I just took it to another level. He shared a story where in the United Kingdom, there's lots of stories about how people are connecting. The policemen, actually the police people in the United Kingdom came up with this sign, and this is exactly what it said. Happy to chat. Sit here if you don't mind someone stopping to say hello. And they put it on the bus benches in the city. And I love that idea. So I have now copied that and I've made a bunch of these signs and plasticized them. And when I go around, I put them certain places, a bus bench, a shopping center, seat, and it's kind of fun because it's my little invitation to the world to chat and to talk. Feel free to borrow it. It's a great thing. This is another, I think, connection builder is name tags. We don't think of wearing name tags out in the world. We think about a conference, but let's be innovative. Let's be creative. How about a little name tag that says, I'm happy to chat? It's an invitation. How about a name tag that says, ask me about? That's one of our favorite ones at Whole Being. And you can fill in, ask me about my grandchildren. You can say, ask me about politics, ask me about gardening, and it cues people in on what you're about and allows people to have something to connect about. That's a lot of fun, so try it. So bringing this on home, here Dr. Murthy's really talking about our intentionality and the choices we make, and that if we make choices to connect and spend quality time with the people in our lives and quantity time with the people in our inner circle, that we really do have an impact on changing how we come through this. And even more, he was talking about, because this was something he said on NPR, about how we come through this pandemic and what we're going to look like on the other side. It matters, the choices we make. And this is very, very, very beautiful and profound. There's a lot of things on this slide. And what Dr. Murthy's really saying here is we shouldn't wait for a tragedy like a pandemic or something. Down here sometimes he has a beautiful example of Hurricane Andrew. I lived through it, he lived through it. Wonderful things that have to do with getting connected, the creativity, the motivation, the desire, the ways people have connected have been profound, amazing, creative, funny, musical, but let's not wait for a tragedy, to do this level of connecting and service. And let's also be mindful of our tendency is just because we're human, we go back to our set points. And let's just try to be more intentional to not get so caught up in our own stuff, so to speak, our own private preoccupations and the dramas of life. And that's because we can enhance the quality of our life with all the things we've learned and shared together going forward. Let's see what else. And last but never least for me is always being in gratitude. Thank you for spending this time with me. And I'm very grateful to the JCC Manhattan. Several people shared it's been their lifeline of community through this pandemic. Particular thanks with tears in my eyes from my heart for Phoebe and Caroline and all the other people that I don't know behind the scenes who have week by week, day by day, created this collaboration. I'm very proud to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Wow. We could talk forever about this, right, guys? I'm getting some nods. Yeah. And I just think you're so innovative to create those circles and draw them and have us look at sort of visually what our constellation of our life was before the pandemic, after the pandemic, during the pandemic. It's a wonderful way to look at this. Anyone else I want you to read some of the notes in the chat. Very meaningful and beautiful, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Grateful to learn more about V. Murthy. Thank you for today. Thank you. Yes. Buddy Bench, my son's class fundraised to get one for our school and park. So that's a wonderful thing. And I saw somewhere a bench for kids at a school that was where you sat if you needed a buddy. Oh, isn't that great? So just feeling connected and often relates to having authentic, open sharing in our lives with others can be through Zoom, phone, in person, the best of all, says Marvin. Yes, and just thank you for reminding us of all that the ways to connect, right? Yeah. I just felt so stimulated by this idea of solitude, which can be wonderful to spend time with myself. The gift of this, as you called them, not the silver lining. I love that you used the word the golden nuggets. What are the golden nuggets that we can get from the pandemic? And this idea of, okay, we do have this epidemic of loneliness in our country, in our civilization, but we also have a new way to connect, which is via Zoom. And we'll soon be integrating back into in-person. And maybe we can pull through some of those ways that we have maintained connections virtually so that loneliness isn't so profound.
Absolutely.
And then the JCC has to have a big giant gala and we all come.
I love it, Lois. Let's do it. Let's do it. So I'm going to take off. I'm going to remove the spotlights. Please take yourself off mute. Say goodbye. Say thank you.
Bye. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Bye. You guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Got some amazing speakers coming up.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Well, nice to see you.
Hi, Ann.
Take care, everyone.
See you
Bye.
next week. See you next Tuesday.
See you next week.